Decoded, The Future of Health, hosted by Dr. Vinod Gauba and Alex Kummerman. Today's special guest is Nir Barzilai, President of the Academy of Health and Lifespan Research and the Director of the Institute for Aging Research at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, discussing disease, longevity, and health spans.
It's a real pleasure to have with us today Professor Nir Barzilai, who is the President of the Academy of Health and Lifespan Research. He's also the Director of the Institute of Aging Research at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and a pioneering researcher in genetics of human longevity. He's known for discovering the first longevity gene linked to exceptional aging. Delighted to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Please do tell us, you've got an accolade of, achievements and research and studies and innovation. If we had to introduce the passion and the essence of why you're here?
I'm glad you didn't talk about my 300 and something publication, because it only means how old I am. Okay, that's all. Exactly. If you live long enough, you can achieve few things. So look, when I was 13, my grandfather took me for walks every Saturday, and he told me about what he did when he was young. Now, think of it. I'm 13 years old. My grandfather is 64, 67 maybe. He's obese. He walks slowly. He's bald and some white hair. And so I look at him and I say, how is it possible that he's done what he tells me? You know, my friends were like, where did my grandparents come from? I don't know what happened to them, okay? For me, it was immediately, that's how I'm going to look like, okay? So this idea that what happened with aging was an early thought for me. It's kind of an unusual, but it's early thought. Okay, then I was a medic. Then I went to medical school. Now, in medical school, you learn that, hey, I can take blood tests and I can see if you're diabetic, if you have high cholesterol. And I'm saying, that's very nice. But the major thing is that you get old. This is the question, because put me in front of an audience as a physician. I don't know who has diabetes and high cholesterol, right? But I know who's old and who's young. And then I'm a resident. And I have an attending who said, when we present, we will say, this is a 67-year-old woman. He said, just a minute, does she look younger or older than her age? And it took a while. It takes a while to realize, why is he stopping me for that? But then you kind of get the fact that there's a biological age and a chronological age. They're not the same. Some people are aging quicker, some are slower. And it matters. You can have a 90 years old come to the emergency room and you look at him and you said, he'll come out, he'll get out, he'll be fine. And you can get a 70-year-old and say, that's not going to happen. Okay. So I think all those things were in my background to say, hey, if aging is so variable, there's hope that we can do something about it. And I have to say that we went from hope to promise. In fact, now we're realizing a promise. That's where we are.
Fantastic.
Beautiful, thank you. And so this is what brought you, and I fully agree that this is the good bed for passion. What is it that in your research that followed this intent of measuring, comparing the aging process? Your research has uncovered really fascinating genetic markers linked to longevity, right? And so can you share with us, please, a particular, what made this discovery possible? What happened in your mind? How was it for you when you made that discovery?
I think the moment that really is the eureka moment, the moment that we thought, wow, is when an investigator by the name of Cynthia Kenyon showed that she mutates one gene in a small worm that's called nematode, and this worm lives several lifespan longer. Okay, this idea that one gene can control aging and longevity was all of a sudden something that says, if you can do it with some gene, maybe it's more complex, but we can do it. So let me actually follow this example, because this gene is called DAF2 that is involved in the insulin growth hormone IGF signaling pathway. Never mind what I just said. But apparently 60% of our centenarians, so I have centenarians, right? I have 750 centenarians and their families, and 60% of them have something that impairs this activity of this growth hormone and the IGF-1. It's the most common pathway. It's not one gene. It's because it's a pathway. But so there are several genes, but 60% of our centenarians are like that. Now, let me explain why it's important. So in the nature kingdom, the dwarfs live longer. The small dogs live longer, right? The ponies live longer. And we can do manipulation in the laboratory, take out growth hormone, express growth hormone, and the more growth hormone you have, the shorter you live. The less, the longer you live. Our centenarians not only have low growth hormone levels, but those with the lowest growth hormone levels live twice as long. They're already 100 years old. They live twice as long as others. So what is this example telling us? It's telling us that when we grow, we need growth hormone because we need to grow and we need everything that's associated with it so we have kids and we're healthy. But after that, we start to break down. We have to protect ourselves from breakdown. It doesn't make sense energetically to grow. We want to change this energetic to have low growth. And so we found this in centenarians. And then we went back to my lab, and with a pharmaceutical, we found an inhibitor for this growth hormone. We gave it to old rodents, and they lived 10% longer, and they were much healthier. So this is an example of one of the drugs that we've been developing based on genetic data. I want to now talk about things that maybe could come before, but you didn't talk. The most important thing when we started to look at 100 years old. So first of all, the 100 years old idea came because, okay, if this worm is live longer, okay, who are the humans that will live longer? We actually discovered people with a disease called progeria that they live shorter, right? And we learned a lot, somewhat related to aging, not always. And I came and said, why don't we look at the people who live longest? And that's how it came. But there was still a problem, okay? Are the people that live long, do they get diseases when we all get disease? And then they live sick longer. And what we found out, and it's with our group of centenarians and other group of centenarians led by Tom Pearls, we harmonized our data and we showed that not only the centenarians live longer, they live healthier. They get diseases 30 years later. And that's not what's important. What's important is not only they get disease later, but when they get disease, they have what we call a contraction of morbidity. They are sick very little time at the end of their life. 30% of our centenarians don't have any disease. They are not going to wake up one morning, or they have a smaller hospitalization. So the idea that we humans have the capacity to live long, to live healthy, and to have a small period of sick time is very important for us to know that that's possible.
And most people accept aging as an inevitable, and they sort of, in some degree or the other, succumb to it or give in to the process. What sparked your interest to really look at aging as a disease and trying to actively treat aging per se, and then obviously leading on to your discoveries from the TAME trial? Just talk us through your mindset of what sparked that.
So first of all, I would say death is inevitable. for now, okay? Aging is not inevitable. And I said already, it was clear to me when I was a resident that I realized that there's biological and chronological age, and I would tell each one of you to look at your friends or your parents' friends and see that we don't age at the same rates, which means there is a biology that we could target. And then you discover, but you're saying, hey, we have lots of organs, and what about the kidney and what about the liver? But you realize that there's pathways that are, we call them upstream, things that you could do, and no matter what cell you do it to, their aging is stunt or reverse or something like that. Okay, so that aging is very flexible. I was in the Vatican. It was when Obama was the president, Biden was the vice president, he was the keynote speaker. So it was Biden, the Pope, and then I talked, right? And the reason I'm telling you is that Biden was pushing the cancer initiative. And he explained, it's difficult because when you have cancer, you have your genes and you have the cancer gene. And even if it's the same cancer in other people, it's different between every people. So it's very, very personalized. So it's personalized, it's expensive, right? The Pope comes and he says, you know what? I still hope that there's one medicine that will treat all cancers all over the world and will be cheap. And then I come up and I say, well, we have a drug that's called metformin that's very cheap, and it doesn't cure cancer, but it prevents cancer. It also prevents cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's and a variety of age-related disease. I was kind of a winner in this argument. But really the point is, I think aging, to start now targeting aging, is much, much cheaper than to treat cancers.
Yeah. And actually the concept of gerotherapeutics, and some of our listeners or watching this may not have heard of that. Could you talk us through what is this domain of therapeutic modalities?
So the gerotherapeutics comes from really the notion that we put the biology of aging that we know in a system that we called hallmarks or drivers or pillars of aging. And each pillar, in order to be a hallmark, what do you have to show? You have to show that something happens with aging. And if you fix it, your animals will live longer and healthier. Or humans, we'll get to it in a second. So this is how you become a hallmark. You discover that those hallmarks are interactive in the sense you fix one, you affect the others too. So all of a sudden, you have a whole network that you can target. Not only that, if you have a drug that you think treats aging, you might think, for example, let's say mitochondria decline, mitochondrial numbers and function decline with aging. And you would say, okay, I can fix this mitochondria. What disease would I target? Well, then you find out that mitochondria also improves metabolism and improves, let's say, the epigenetic changes in aging. All of a sudden, you have under indication. Maybe this is a treatment for diabetes, right? Or maybe it's a treatment for cognitive function. So I think the concept of gerotherapeutic came from the idea that we understand the biology of aging, not all of it, but a lot of it. There's still growing amounts of hallmarks. And I would say even those hallmarks are not all the mechanism of aging. But you target them, you target others, and all of a sudden you have a more global approach to your health.
Absolutely.
So the notion of time into aging is paramount, right? So how do you explore the different notions of time under the same umbrella? What is it that, how do you regroup or have a holistic approach of time is aging, but then it is specialized into, it has different speeds or it has different...
Yeah, look, basically, aging starts after in utero, right? In fact, I've done studies where in rats we tied the uterine artery so that pups wouldn't get nutrients. And when they were born small for their age, they developed age-related disease much faster. It's something that was observed in humans who are born small for gestational age, right? So here's an example of intrauterine exposure. And then you go through puberty and other life. And in each one of them, there are things that, first of all, you age, right? You age in the years through all of them. But it's not the same aging, and it's not the same rates throughout. I think from a biomarker perspective, there are two main aging peaks. One is at like the 40s, and the other is after 65, okay? And they're a little bit different. I'm actually one of the discoverer of important things that happen after the age of 65. But yes, aging is not totally linear, and it's maybe not the same in all aspects of longevity.
And within the body, neither. Our different organs don't age the same way. It's not an ensemble. It is a component part, right?
Right. So one of our major discoveries. So we took 5,000 protein from a blood sample and examined them on 1,000 people. Okay. So we have a lot of information. Those are people over the age of 65, between 65 and 95. And we see there's huge amount of proteins that are changing. It's a little bit of a mess. But then, so from those proteins, we could take like 100 proteins and determine the age, the biological age of individual. Okay, just like you do with other biomarkers, you probably have some other people that you talk to. So we have kind of the clock, right, of the age. But then we did something else. A lot of what we found is breakdown of tissues. And we said, let's find out what proteins came from specific organs. And we looked at like 22 organs, and in most of them we discovered several proteins that if we measured in the plasma, it means that their cells broke down. And so now we could determine the age not of the organism, but of those organs too. Now, I would tell you that the correlation between the age, your old age, and the organ is the correlation of 0.8. It's a pretty good correlation. It's kind of the same. However, we found, for example, people whose aging was slow, but their brain aging was fast. Or people whose aging was fast and the liver aging was not. Or people whose aging was slow and their liver aging was fast. And then we're in an era where we can determine your old age, but also your organ age, because maybe one of your organs is going to lead your problems. Maybe if your liver ages fast, we should see if you're alcoholic. We should see if you have cancer there. We can see something, and it will help us to maybe target the aging of an organ in a more specific way, or choose the right drug for that.
Just shifting gear into one aspect of longevity medicine, or staying healthy for longer, which is supplementation. Now, I know different people have different levels of priorities on it, and what are your thoughts on it? And do you feel it needs to be personalized to a level where the actual ingredient and the dosage needs to also be customized for individuals? Like, where do you see we should be going on that front?
So, first of all, let me provoke you and say, not Brian Johnson.
Sure.
Okay, not Brian Johnson. If you take 150 supplements, and let's say those supplements are really in the box, sometimes they are not, right? There's also half-life. You think, when I see what it takes, I say, I understand why it takes that. And he thinks that if he's taking one over the other, they're additive, maybe even synergistic. But a lot of them can be antagonistic. Okay? And I think that's a problem. In fact, one of our major journals, JAMA, had an article about 7 million people were followed for 12 years. And astonishingly, and I'll say why it's so astonishing, the people on multivitamin had 4% increase in mortality. It's astonishing because usually people who take multivitamins do other stuff. They're also exercising. They're also dieting. They're doing lots of other stuff. And still you get the signal that something is bad here. I would tell you also an anecdote. That the same time, Brian Johnson and I had the same test. We were in the same event. We had the same test. And we were both 4 years younger than our age. Now, it's not that I'm not trying, but not with 150 things and the blood of my kid and some other things. So if he got only 4 years, I think that there's contradictions in this multi-supplement. So supplements are, they're at the level of the hope. Actually, very few have shown to be beneficial. There are trials more. And I think the public has to know that supplements are hope. They're not promise. And if you want to decide to take a supplement, you should ask if there's a clinical study. What's a clinical study? You take population, placebo, and control. You have an outcome that is predetermined, and you have to have a statistical change in this outcome. If this didn't happen, then it's good, but for the economy, not for you. And I think that it's good to support the economy.
But I suppose there's also the issue in general with this space that if the outcome indicator is not having a disease, and the longitudinal nature that you need to collect data for to be able to show that, it might be that we're missing out on certain very useful compounds because we're waiting for the studies to show that endpoint. So what do you think?
Well, studies don't have to have long time for outputs. I can give you as an example. There are studies on intermittent fasting, and you don't have to have more than 3 months in order to get variety of biomarkers, of clinical data that shows you that it goes to the right direction. I'll tell you things that increase NAD. Okay, this is an important energetic factor in our cell. And if you hear on NR or NMN or some precursor that increase that, have really failed to show important results. I'm an editor of the Journal of Gerontology. I get to review a lot of those papers, and they're disappointing. Also, a lot of studies have been in phase 2 for 3 years, which means it's not going to happen. Okay? So I think, and by the way, another reason is a lot of the push comes from PhDs. Okay? And PhDs work on nematodes or on mice, and not everything that works on mice ends up working in humans. Why NMN in my lab works on animals, but I'm not sure it works in humans. Why? Maybe because we have different microbiome. Maybe the microbiome eats the NMN. Maybe there's a different other physiology. Maybe it's more regulated. But I haven't seen a study where in sophisticated way you could show that this NMN go to the muscle and change its energetic. Okay? I haven't seen that. So unless somebody will come and maybe find a better NMR or one that is, or find a different population, because maybe if your NAD is okay, it's not going to change much because it's maybe regulated. But unless you find where it's important, I think the money is not worth spending.
So, there's obviously people who start using NAD and they feel like their energy is shot through the roof. would you say that's placebo effect then?
So, I'm actually aware and interested in the IV infusion of NAD. And I heard lots of people who told me, we were jet lagged. We came from, somewhere. We ordered NAD. We paid $1,500. We got the infusion. We got up. We're so okay. This is, by the way, immediately, for me, I'm very suspicious, okay? Infusion of saline, if you're hydrated, is going to make you feel better. But I believe that there's something else that they're infusing, like amphetamines or something like that, okay? When you don't have access and you don't know what's being infused, I think it's something else. Now, on the other hand, they paid $1,500. You pay $1,500, you have to feel better. Okay, you pay. Yeah. You got infusion. You got some who knows what water amphetamines. So what? Okay, so what? So fine.
Yeah. Well, then, look, it begs the question there that I'm sure is on everyone's mind, is that what do you then take for your routine? And if you'd be kind enough to share, out of all the knowledge and information you've had and the studies you have access to, what has reached to your life and your everyday living?
Yeah, I don't want to be kind and share. So look, people know, and I'm talking about it freely. I was pre-diabetic. I don't know. It's like 15 years ago or 10 years ago, and with my doctor, we decided that I'll take metformin. Since then, I haven't been close to pre-diabetic. Okay, and then I'm also thinking that it has other effects, not only on my pre-diabetic. Before COVID, I started another thing, and that's intermittent fasting. Maybe let me tell you the story of intermittent fasting so you understand why I'm doing it. And it's easy for me to do. It's not easy for everyone to do. And if you want to lose weight, then men lose more weight than women, but there are differences. But this is what happened. The experiment that we all did when I started aging, which, the few of us that were the pioneers, we would take any animal or we'll take brothers, and half of them will give them to eat whatever they want, and the others will caloric restrict. We'll give them 60% of that food, okay? 40% caloric restriction. And they would live healthier and longer by 40%. There's actually no intervention that has been better than that. So people said, so longevity is about eating less for breakfast, less for lunch, less for dinner. But what we did was something else. We came in the morning and we gave those animals the food for the day. Now they're hungry. So they finish the food in 20 minutes and then they're fasting for 23 hours. In fact, when we give them the food throughout the day, they are leaner, but they don't live much longer. So it's the combination of less calories and fasting that was really important for the animals. Now, we came and invented these 16 hours, okay? And I'll tell you, after 16 hours of fast, I don't have the metabolism of those animals. They lose more fat. Okay, it's better. But I would tell you that so many of my functions have improved, including exercise capacity, including cognitive clarity, and other things. So, it works for me. It works for many others. So metformin and caloric restriction. Now, I would tell you one thing. I have a longevity doctor. And with this longevity doctor, I'm trying sometimes other things. So I'm saying, what should we measure now? How long do we go? What do we measure after? What is the go, no-go signals? So I'm experimenting, but I want to tell you and everyone, I don't want to tell you because this is not science. Science is not by one. Like Brian Johnson, he says, I'm doing science. No, you're not doing science. Because even if you're successful, it doesn't mean that other will be successful. And more than that, My fear is that Brian Johnson dies because he has all those multivitamins, and people will tell us, if Brian Johnson didn't make it, why do you think you'll make it? So I want out this in this program to say, I said that Brian Johnson will die, and I won't.
Well, let's hope you both live a long, healthy, happy life. But so I suppose what you're saying is, when you're introducing even a supplement or any such modality, doing it in a controlled manner where you can monitor the outcome and actually know whether it works for you or not before hodgepodging a multivitamin and just shoving it through and hoping for the best. Would that be a fair?
That'd be a fair. The second part is, I would like the field to be more active, but I'd like the field to be more active with drugs that already have been approved to the FDA. And we know that there are also those gerotherapeutics that also change the rate of aging. I think it's more important because I want the MDs to lead this science and not Brian Johnson. Sorry that I pick on him so much. I think FDA-approved drugs already had a lot of safety. Several animals, then human data. There's also efficacy. There's also years of use. Okay, that's why on metformin has been used since 1920s. We know so much about metformin. We're not going to discover anything new about it. We know the side effects. We know everything. So I think it's important to do FDA drugs, and also because FDA-approved drugs can be legally repurposed. Okay, metformin, for example, that is for treatment of diabetes by the FDA, right? Approved for treatment of diabetes, has been actually repurposed for obesity. There are much better drugs than that. Has been for polycystic ovary syndrome. It's the first drug of choice. For prediabetes, it's the first drug of choice. For COVID, if you have COVID, it's the only drug that will decrease your hospitalization, mortality, and long COVID by like 50%, 60%. So, because it's an aging drug, it works on many ways. So metformin has been repurposed, but everything I counted now is not FDA approved. But the FDA doesn't have any problem with doctors finding another things, indications to other drugs. So I think that's what I'd like to do. I'd like people to think of what drugs are out there. How do we choose those drugs to patients? Look, like always, we still are going to be in a situation where we'll save 100 people and kill 3. It's not a reason not to save 100 people, but we need to choose the 100 people more carefully, and we need to avoid those 3. And this is a challenge that will be achieved with personalized medicine. We'll just have to know. We'll have to educate the people. And you know what? If there's no one drug, there's another drug that's good for you. And we can find relatively fast what we have to watch for.
And when taking all this knowledge into the sort of more conventional medical setting, whether it's hospitals or clinics or so forth, what role do you feel the multi-omic testing and artificial intelligence have a role? What role do they have to play in implementing and actually delivering such information?
So we are leading with the American Federation for Aging Research an initiative that I started. It's called FAST. I wanted it to go fast. It doesn't go that fast, but it's still going to be very fast. The idea is we have 4 drugs or more drugs that are gerotherapeutics that have been in clinical trials. So we want to take the blood samples from those clinical trials and look at what changed in all those omics before and after, within a year of treatment. So now we have lifestyle and metformin and SGLT2 inhibitors and GLP-1 inhibitors, and we'll probably have others. And each one of them will have its own specific effect, but I think that we'll find that there'll be things that are common, that are going to be the ones that will share in stopping aging. For example, stopping the breakdown, right? That I said is one of the biomarkers of aging. I think it will come up in the middle. And so we're doing here two things. First of all, we're still discovering biomarkers of aging because we're going to have all those people in. But that's not what's important. What's important is what changed within a short period of time. We want, first of all, patient to come and do something. We'll convince them to start exercising. And in 3 months, we want to show that they're younger, right? Pretty much. We need, just like we have cholesterol that is satisfying for you to know that your LDL is low, we need a test like that. But as important, we need biotechs within phase 2 trial to see if the biomarkers go to the right place, right? Before they spend $1 billion in phase 3 trials.
Sure.
So I think it's really crucial. And it's true that the biomarkers seems like a mess, but I think we're closing on it. Look, it's always, so now I'm saying we're in my subjects, we have hundreds of thousands, probably I should say millions of biomarkers. Okay, if I tell genetic and epigenetic and the proteomic and stuff. But I'm still looking for a needle in a haystack. All I did was increase the haystack for now. So I need AI I need AI and good studies to tell me, okay, I know the haystack and I'll get to the needle.
Fantastic. And for this, you have an ongoing initiative that is followed by computer scientists, I imagine, that are not only researchers in the medical field. And that's where computer science and medical studies.
Right. We actually hope that ARPA-H is a new institute. We hope it survives. There's lots of changes in the politics of the United States. We'll do it because we need a significant amount of money, and it looks like it's going there. But I think you raise another problem, or I don't like to say problems, but challenges. When I started interacting with AI people, they say, you don't have to tell me anything. I'll give you the data. Okay? And they don't understand that's wrong. I remember the day where AI looked at 3 million people, electronic medical record of 3 million people over 20 years. And they said, obesity is a risk for diabetes. I know it 80 years without AI, okay? Yeah. We have to have a team that can really ask questions and accelerate it. And we're not, I've spent a lot of time in my research environment and we're becoming good at that. But a lot of the AI is not helpful. Okay, not helpful, or people don't realize, or people are coming with drugs. People say, sulfonylurea, it's a drug for diabetes that is hypoglycemic. They said that's good for longevity. Well, you cannot take it. Your glucose will be low and you'll die much. Okay, so people, AI has to have a layer of still people who knows more than ChatGPT about what it means.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe it'll change, but for now it's not. It's a real problem.
Yeah, it's that human technology interface that needs to be respected.
Yeah, I'll give you maybe another example. There's a question: how much of aging is genetic? And I'll tell you. Maybe I'll go back to my family. So my grandfather got a heart attack and he died. Okay, at that time, 67. My father got a heart attack when he was 67. But he had triple bypass and he lived to be 84. Okay. So you can see the genetics is the same. The environment has changed. Okay. So you can really, it's very hard when you combine age-related disease environment to say what's genetic and what's environment. Now, there's a paper, but the right answer in the Board of Geriatrics is 20%, 25% genetics and the other environment. but the thought that, okay, 80% go to this side of the room and 20% to that is wrong, because the environment interacts through genes. Okay, so it's not anything that can be separated. And as I said, centenarians, to be a centenarians, you need genes.
Yes.
Okay, you need something that slows your aging. Okay, for the majority of the things. So we cannot really control the gene and environment. I don't know what we started to talk about, so I lost.
No, it was
Don't
about
worry.
AI and the
AI,
link
right,
with
AI.
Time that out.
So there's a study that was well publicized that said, okay, genetics is only 9% of aging. And what is the major reason? It's assortative mating. Assortative mating is, if you're a smoker, you're likely to marry a smoker. If you're obese, you're likely to marry an obese. Okay? If you're poor, you're likely to be poor. And if you want to find the genetics, you have to account for that, not to say that that's a reason. Okay? So those are people who do AI, and they really didn't know what they thought they found something interesting. We know, in every town, the rich live 20% longer than the poor people, okay? And there's a lot of things like that. And yes, assortative mating, if you have the same income, you're going to be better. If you have good income, you're going to be better. The couple is going to be better. So I think this question is, for me, it's funny. For me, the genetic is relevant for 100 years old, because longevity genes I can turn into medicine, okay? But this thing of what happened in middle age, it really doesn't matter.
Well, assortative mating is definitely a new term for those people going down the pub or meeting their new partners now. Make sure you diversify the gene pool as well. But on that note, thank you so much for spending time with us and giving us those very valuable insights. We look forward to all the research that unfolds and all the new discoveries that are going to continue to emerge. And please do share your final thoughts.
I just want to say one thing. We're talking obviously about getting older adults and what we can do about them. But this is not really the only people who need help. For example, if you recover from cancer, if you got chemotherapy or radiation, which is aging you, you're going to age quickly. Women who went after breast cancer are older. Kids who recover from cancer get heart disease at age of 35, okay? So they need help. People with HIV get diseases 10 years before their friends. They need help. People who are disabled, okay, because they eat more, they move less, they need help. But also, if we want to go to Mars, if really is that now with Musk in power, who knows? But we are not going to get there before we solve aging because of cosmic radiation. We're not going to get healthy. We'll get heart disease or cancer on the way there, and we're not going to make it back. So there's a lot of reason to really target the aging process and extend health span to everyone.
Yeah. And I think it's just about being responsible in the way you digest that information and what gets finally implemented into people's everyday lives, I suppose. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Professor. It's an absolute honor to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.